the urban legend that I heard was you're not supposed to prune roses until the first Red Sox home game. So I think that is April 9th. So we're in the region and things have warmed up a little bit. It's hard. Um Spring is usually kind of rainy and dank, and you want to just be careful with cuts on roses. They're very susceptible to fungus and all sorts of diseases. So trying to keep the wounds not too big and not too soon, just so that any new growth that flushes out. Whenever you're cutting, you're sort of telling your plant to come down in size and then it'll flush out again. And you would just want to make sure that you're not leaving it open to disease and pests, and then you're not sort of flushing new growth on it when there's still the possibility of cold spells.
Hello, everyone, and here we go on a rather gloomy Friday out here. Welcome to our Ask the Expert event. Today we'll be learning about preparing your garden for spring, which of course has arrived a bit early this year. We're here with public gardening expert Karen Daubmann. I'm Dave Epstein. If you don't know me, I'm a meteorologist with GBH on with Paris and Jeremy every morning. I'm also a gardening expert as well, so it's always fun to do this. Thanks everyone that joined us today, including our Champion Circle and Beacon Circle members. We appreciate very much, as do I, your continued generous support. GBH would also like to thank the Mass Hort Society for being a partner for this event. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Karen Daubmann. Karen has committed to create effort and a long-standing change in public gardens throughout her 25-year-long career. Daubmann joined Massachusetts Horticultural Society just a couple of years ago, where she brings her expertise in advancing the operational and planning scale of public gardens in the development and execution of exhibitions that have welcomed hundreds of thousands of visitors. Karen focuses her work on encouraging guests to connect and interact with gardens through art, nature, and culture. Prior to joining MHS, she worked for 14 years at New York's Botanical Garden, culminating her position as Vice President for Exhibitions and Audience Engagement. She's been featured in Jennifer Jewell's The Earth in Her Hands, 75 Extraordinary Women Reimagining Life with Plants, that has contributed and has also contributed essays for Cosmic Nature back a few years ago, and Frida Kahlo's garden in 2015. I actually, Karen, just saw that garden 2 weeks ago. I was in Mexico City, so amazing garden. And Karen, you've prepared some questions to open up. What things are you working on now? So I'm going to kind of ask you a couple of questions, like what's going on at Mass Hort? I know you guys open up April 1st, if I'm correct, to the public, right? So how are you, as a public space, how are you preparing for spring and the throngs of visitors that are going to be there soon?
I think we have the same issues that everybody has, just on a different scale. So we do open to the public April 1st. We planted 50,000 tulips last fall. They're coming up. They're probably 12 days ahead of where they were last year. And looking at the 10-day forecast, we're in the mid to high 40s and not cold evenings. So we are probably going to have a pretty early tulip showing. We're working on a lot of really great spring festival weekends. We have an Ikebana showcase going on April 20th and 21st. And we are cleaning up the gardens. We're doing some cutbacks. And everything still is dormant. So we are, getting ready. We're getting prepared to do some reseeding of lawns, raking up a lot of twigs, doing a lot of pruning still. I saw there's a question coming up about pruning rose bushes. So that's not yet, but soon. Basically cleaning, tidying, getting prepared, ordering all of our supplies, and really getting ready to roll because the weather is telling us it's time.
That's awesome. So, do you have any spring bulbs, like the early stuff, like winter aconite or some of the, crocus or any of those that have been up? And what are you noticing this year?
We have a few. We don't have a lot. The garden, I think, used to open before I started, used to open in May. So there wasn't a lot of spring color. We've been adding a lot more. We've got hellebores right now. We've got a few crocus and a few small daffodils. I'm trying to think. I've seen some iris, reticulata flowering. Yeah, it's starting.
Yeah, it's definitely been
We
an
always
early
want
spring.
more early spring color, though. I would love to do more in the way of magnolias and cherry blossoms. We have some, and I'm very excited to add a lot of lilacs and things like that. I love when there's color that proceeds throughout the season. We're doing more with what's in bloom for visitors. So when they come to the garden, they'll have a map that shows them all the best things that they should sort of look for when they're touring the garden.
What are you thinking of for this year? Like, what is something that you'll be adding that you're excited about?
We wanted to last year. We wanted to do a gourd tunnel and we didn't get to it, but we've got a really cute, exciting, there's some really little black cat pumpkins and some little white pumpkins and some bottle gourds and stuff we're excited about. Anything that we can sort of wow people that they want to take pictures of and that ties into educational programming, especially with the camp groups that we have in the summer. We're excited about that. We're doing a lot more touchable things in the children's garden, things that kids can grab and pet that smell good. Trying to think what else. Just a lot. We've got a lot of cleanup days in our Olmsted garden. It was neglected for about 70 years, and we've done some clearing of so we've done some tree work with stuff that had broken and fallen in storms, and we're welcoming volunteer groups to pull invasive plants. So there's a lot going on.
And for folks, before we have a lot of questions coming in, but I'll give you one more. So for folks who might not be familiar, where are you located?
We're in Wellesley in the Elm Bank Reservation, and we have a little bit more than 30 acres sort of set apart from the Elm Bank Reservation. So it's sort of where Dover meets Wellesley meets Needham. And it's a great spot. We have a children's garden, a very large perennial garden, an Italianate garden, herb garden, native plant garden, lots of open areas. We do a lot of weddings here. Really great educational programming, a vegetable garden, rhododendron garden. Yeah, and we're sort of refurbishing all of it. Our big push this year, we're working on New England Fall Flower Show, Heritage and Hope, September 21st and 22nd. So much of what we're doing is making sure the garden looks fabulous for September. It always does. I feel like I love September gardens in this region with the ornamental grasses and dahlias looking good. So we're going to add in some other cool things that people can see when they come to visit us that weekend.
Awesome. I don't want to think about September, so
I
let's
know.
back up.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's get through March.
But you got to think
So
through all these things. You got to think through these seasons as a gardener, and it's like time to get stuff started and get out there. So you don't want to think about the end of the season, but you have to.
yeah. One of the first questions here, speaking of the beginning of the season, talks about, there's been a lot in the past few years about leaving leaf litter and not moving it too quickly and all that. What's your thinking on that? What are you folks doing about that?
We did a good leaf cleanup last fall, and I realized that's not necessarily ideal. So we did blow some leaves into beds. We have an event called Festival of Trees, so we can't really leave the leaves on in the area just because it's too slippery and there's people still navigating the gardens all winter. So we pick up some leaves and then we blow some leaves into beds. And we're not really picking up the leaves that have accumulated over the winter just yet. But we'll be doing that in the next couple weeks. And then we have the Noana native plant garden as part of one of our display gardens. And in that area, we do leave them on. So we want to teach people about the maybe ideal scenario for garden cleanup in certain areas of our garden. We also have weddings that are starting mid-April, so we're picking and choosing which areas to clean up first based on what the needs of the garden are.
Let's talk a little bit about the roses. You mentioned it at the beginning. That was one of the first questions that came in. So I personally started feeding and pruning roses right now. What are you guys doing?
When I moved back to this area, the urban legend that I heard was you're not supposed to prune roses until the first Red Sox home game. So I think that is April 9th. So we're in the region and things have warmed up a little bit. It's hard. It's um spring is usually kind of rainy and dank, and you want to just be careful with cuts on roses. They're very susceptible to fungus and all sorts of diseases. So trying to keep the wounds not too big and not too soon, just so that any new growth that flushes out. Whenever you're cutting, you're sort of telling your plant to come down in size and then it'll flush out again. And you would just want to make sure that you're not leaving it open to disease and pests, and then you're not sort of flushing new growth on it when there's still the possibility of cold spells. But it's very
Awesome.
soon. It's happening. It's time.
Yeah, it is. So one of the things I noticed in the basement yesterday, I was down and noticed my dahlias starting to kind of sprout, and they're very yellow because there's no light down there. So what are you doing about the dahlias this time of year?
So we're lucky we have a couple of different growing facilities, and we work with Yankee Dahlia Society. So we have been pulling the dahlias out of the basements and crawl spaces and all the behind the scenes areas and getting them going. We have a hoop house that's not super heated, but it doesn't get frozen at night. It's a little bit heated. So we're starting to get them going in light. Um, Light and warmth, not a ton of water just yet because they don't have that root mass and the tops that require it, but just getting them out of dormancy and getting them in warm and bright places.
So one of the questions we have here from Robin is about woodchucks. Right now, I'm fighting voles this spring.
Yes,
Voles are just everywhere. I think the mild winter has really just
agree.
let them kind of explode. I've planted peas 3 times already because of those. What are you doing about woodchucks?
We are noticing the difference in critter activity this year. We are not super successful with trapping, and I know people don't love trapping. Um, we have just installed a it's like a 3-strand critter protection fence around our trial garden, and we've had pretty good luck with that. It's slightly electrified, and just the way that the 3 strands are separated, the larger animals like deer can't sort of navigate to jump into the garden. But we've also noticed that sort of the vibrations from this system have also stopped other um animal situations that we've had earlier in the season. So that's what we're leaning on right now. I think it's from Garrity Fence Company, and you can sort of customize it for whatever your space is. So that's what we're working on. We were trying to trap with apples and peanut butter, and it just wasn't working. They're too smart for us.
So another question comes from Anne. Where can I get advice on putting in native shade gardens?
So we have some classes on native plant gardening here at Massachusetts Horticultural Society. You can check our website. When we open April 1st, come out and visit us. We have the Noana Native Plant Garden, which does have some very shady sections. So you'll be able to look at plant labels and plant lists and see maybe what you like and what you don't like. And then we're also really lucky that we've got the Native Plant Trust right in our backyard, and they are experts on it. So you can also visit their garden. They have a lot of information, and Uli, who's their lead spokesperson for native plants, has a book out, which is really fabulous. I think it's hot off the presses. Maybe it's definitely within the last year. So there's a lot of resources, especially in our area. So when you're looking to do native plant garden, obviously you want to sort of check out your zone, what's going on, see what you like, and get advice for your specific region.
It's great. Yeah, I love Native Plant Trust. Like they're, as you said, it's just a great resource here. This one comes from Susan. She's down in Providence, a little warmer. What perennials that flower and have some ground cover and she has a lot of sun and then a lot of shade because of the trees by the sidewalk recommended things. So, it can be a challenging area by asphalt. So anything that you kind of like to plant?
Um, Very hot and sunny, very hot and sunny. Trying to think. We've used some geraniums. They're not as they don't want to be cooked up. Let me think about this.
Maybe some sedums would,
Maybe some
some of
sedum,
the
yeah,
ground
anything with those
sedums.
big succulent leaves. There's a lot of new cultivars of sedum out there, some ground covers and some that are a little bit taller. There's some really great ornamental grasses. We look through Hoffman Nursery has really great collections of all sorts of plants coming out that you can buy in plugs or slightly larger. And they have a lot of variables as far as durability for roadsides. And especially I would say native plants because they are very used to the climate and very used to the full sun. There's a lot of selections. I'm trying to think what we have right near the pathways here. I did a lot of parsley, but it's not perennial. I did a parsley and uh, some herbs and stuff like that. Um, so possibly, but those aren't
Yeah.
perennials, most of them.
Maybe some of the smaller asters too that stay a little lower. Those like the sun.
Yeah, I sort of actually look around when I'm driving and like what is on the side of the highway, what is on the side of
Yeah.
the roadside, that will definitely be durable for a side of sidewalk situation.
Yeah. Good tip. Um, so I need suggestions for keeping bunnies from eating my spring flowers. Yeah. Good luck. What do you think?
Yeah, pests are the problem. But it's hard to come on here and talk about trapping or shooting or killing or poisoning or nobody wants to hear it, but everybody wants a beautiful garden. There's some little like sort of wattle fencing scenarios to keep them out. But I'm not going to suggest poisoning or killing rabbits. um I don't know, I'm just not going to do that
Yeah,
because then
I
I'm
put
gonna
it, I
have
mean,
people coming at me with flaming pitchforks.
yeah, I put a little fence. I have a fence around the areas where the rabbit's particularly bad. So you can get a rabbit fence, once it's up a little bit, like 2.5, 3 feet,
Yeah,
they're not going to get in there.
like
So
chicken wire would
yeah,
work,
chicken
little
wire fence is what
posts,
I use.
and you just sort of take it down when you don't see them anymore and hope that they move on to another area and don't have
Yeah.
successive batches of babies in your yard.
Charlotte's asking us about the hydrangeas. This is always a favorite question. When do you prune? What types do you prune? What aren't you pruning? It sounds like she's got buds on there, so they might be the macrophilia ones. So what do you think?
Yeah, we're pruning sort of the Annabelle types and keeping them in check. They get really big. So you can take those down to the ground. And the big flowered types, you want to be really careful to not remove last year's growth that has buds on the top. So you can typically see um the older wood that's not going to flower is typically like whiter, very faded out and usually kind of crispy. When you go in there, it wants to fall apart and get cleaned out at the base. And when in doubt, not everything needs to be pruned all the time. So when in doubt, I would say don't prune it.
Speaking of pruning, what about clematis? Different. We've got. I know this like type A and group C and type B, and it can get confusing.
A lot of people are taking it down to maybe 18 or 20 inches just because the tops have gotten real scraggly and tangled and they need to be more aesthetically managed. And then you're going to get a lot of growth very quickly on clematis. But yes, if you're concerned about what kind you have, um, try and figure out what cultivar you have, and you can look it up online to see how people suggest pruning it. But mostly it's like a tidying cutback. Um, and then if it's very sort of thicker than the newest growth, you'd leave that and you'd get branching to fill out your trellises. So, but most people, what they're doing is sort of cutting it back to about 20 inches.
Yeah, you can see this time of year there's little growth. What's going to grow has a little bud on it, right? So
Yes.
I tend to do what you're suggesting, like 18, 20, 24 inches, something in there, cut the rest of it off, and it's gonna go so crazy anyway.
Yep.
Um, that,
And then if you
I
come
find
back and
that
it's sprouted out and there's still some brown that remains, you can always like fine tune it a little bit, but that's about where you want to be for pruning.
in terms of pruning, just back to the hydrangea, how late can you prune the like something like limelight or any of those others, Annabelle types?
Um, you don't want to, some people have done pruning already on limelights and Annabelles and stuff like that. You want to get it going before it really starts to bud out. It is something that you do when it's dormant. So, get it done. Put it on the list for the weekend.
Sooner than
I have
later.
to do mine.
So lawns, when
It's
should
it's
you?
also a great time. So I have around the garden here, we have hydrangeas in the Italianate garden. We've done the pruning here. You're taking them back to, again, maybe like 18, 20 inches, but it depends on how big you want them to be. Some people are overwhelmed by hydrangeas because they're like, they're way bigger than I wanted them to be. They're overtaking my house. Take them back. You can take them back to sort of main branching and secondary branching. Take out things that crisscross, take out things that might be broken, take out branches that are sort of dragging on the ground that you don't want. You could have a very nice sort of upright vase shaped little very structural hydrangea, and it will get to be the size. It will get to be 3.5, 4 feet by the end of the summer. It really explodes. So I think some people are a little gentle on them. We did some rejuvenation pruning in another spot in the garden that the hydrangeas probably hadn't been addressed in, I don't know, 6 or 8 years, and took them back pretty well. So we're excited that they're gonna have more flowers on them, and we'll start to be able to control their shape a little bit better.
Feeling like I want to go prune this afternoon after
I know.
we finish up. Do you would you apply the same thing to Rose of Sharon as well this time of year?
Those are like bulletproof. Yeah,
Yeah,
I would take them back. It's the time.
right.
Yeah.
Cut those back.
And a lot of people
Um,
are doing fruit trees. I'm not a fruit tree expert, but a lot of people are doing, you want to do it when it's dormant before they branch out, and it's, wrap it up on the fruit trees and, again, get rid of anything that looks sort of questionable, make nice fresh cuts, anything that's sort of crisscrossing, because you want your fruit to be able to receive as much sun as possible. So a nice open canopy.
uh, I know my answer to this. I'm curious what you think.
Uh-oh,
Growing,
challenge.
no, it's not controversy. Grass seed. When would you put it down?
Um, it's not quite yet. I think we're probably going to do it in the next 2 weeks. We have some nice blends that we're working with. We have a shade blend and we have a sun blend. There's different sort of seed stores in the area that you can get really nice blends from. I would just have people read the labels. You're sort of surprised. I don't want to call out any brands in particular, but sometimes when you go to the hardware stores, you flip over and you sort of look at what you're purchasing and it's not really what you think you're purchasing. So look at the label and look at the percentages of the seed blends. You're going to want likely some Kentucky bluegrass, some ryegrass, and not a lot of weed seed content in there. Um, we we don't have our irrigation on for the system yet, our irrigation system on for the season yet. And we try to put seed out when we know it's gonna be like a nice slight drizzly rain, nice and moist. So we'll get our irrigation up and running shortly and start doing split seeding and overseeding, dethatching, core aeration, all of those things. And yeah, I'd say probably within 2 weeks. We're watching the weather. So cool
Me too.
mornings,
Me too.
cool evenings, a light mist in the air. And then if it gets super hot, that you have a way that you can keep the germination process going if you need to add a little bit of moisture with irrigation.
What about starting inside things that we know we can't put out yet? So an example would be zinnias. When I actually throw the zinnias right into the ground and just let them. I just wait until late April, early May. But if you want to start them inside to give them a little bit of a head start, when are you doing that?
We started some stuff in January. We started some sweet peas. We started Poppies. We started stuff that can take some chill of spring. So we call them the spring annuals. We started those in January and we'll be planting those out again in the next 2 weeks. And then we're making way in the greenhouses. The dahlias are getting warmed up. Some of our other cannas and bonanzas and stuff are getting warmed up and tidied, and we are starting. We will throw a lot of seeds out in the garden this year, but we are starting. We have volunteers in the greenhouse the next 2 weeks, and we'll be doing a lot more seeding. We do all the seeding for our All American selections. We have 4 trial groups: in-ground ornamentals, in-ground vegetables, container vegetables, and container ornamentals. And so all of those seeds are in, and we're starting them next 2 weeks. And remember, like, we really could get frost until Memorial Day. We usually cheat that a little bit. So if you're thinking about putting stuff outside, you have to have some sort of plan if it does frost. So either bring them back inside or some crop covers, things like that. We got frost last May 19th, and we had planted and it was not great.
Yeah.
It's
So
like, what is this, Fool's Spring? Is that what they call it? There's like 10 stages of spring in New England, and this is Fool's Spring right now.
yeah, it's just for me, it's just early. I mean, this coming week, we're going to see temperatures certainly away from the coastline in the 20s. So, you know, even if you got ambitious and put pansies out, I'd probably bring them in at night or throw a cover on them just so the
Exactly.
blossoms don't get blasted. But the April 1st is the average last date of frost downtown Boston. Closer out where, you know, Metro West, closer to May 10th to May 15th. And then you get up to the 495 belt, you can have May 20th late. It would be unusual to get anything after that at this point. I mean,
Yeah.
the warming climate really has changed things quite a bit.
Yeah.
So we got a question from Chris's iPhone. I'm new to gardening, but just moved into a new home with some raised beds, fruits, veggies, herbs. What do you say to somebody who kind of wants to, you know, they walk into a space and it's like, I don't know what to do, and I want to recultivate it and I want to get it going. How do you tackle for new homeowners something like that?
I think, gardeners are hopeful by nature. So I think it's actually a really good time of year to be inheriting a new garden, because you can plant what you want in maybe one section, but you can also see your garden evolve over the seasons, and maybe you know who the homeowner was, or maybe your neighbors will tell you what the special things that somebody had planted in your yard. So it's like a little bit of discovery of what you actually have, because nothing's really sprouted out of the ground yet. So things will start emerging, and some of it'll be a mystery to you, but it's exciting. Especially with raised beds, there's probably not much in there. So I would say make sure the soil is good. Maybe replace some soil or add compost to it, and then plant what you like. Plant what you like to eat. Maybe the first thing though is to make sure you have water nearby. I'm sure they do, and see if there's any huge trees in your yard that are going to shade it out. And that'll just be the real difference of, can you plant shade stuff or sun stuff? I would think that most people would put raised beds in a very sunny area. So, grow stuff you like to eat, grow stuff that you want to cut and put, in a vase inside your house. And it's a really great time to experiment, especially when you buy a new house. I always got the advice, like, don't tear it up too quickly. Live in it, see how you use it, see what emerges. There's always surprises. And then people will start giving you stuff too, which is the other thing. There's a lot of great plant sales in the spring. There's people dividing perennials. So think about maybe what your favorite color palette is, or think about what you've always dreamed of growing, and it'll start coming to you.
Yeah, great advice, Karen. I think also there's people out there that maybe would come to your house for a day or an hour and just kind of walk through with you. Here's what you have, here's what you have, here's what you have. And that can be really helpful, especially for a real novice that's like, you just don't know. Do I cut this? Do I leave it? It can be,
Exactly.
it
Yeah,
can be,
that's a
it
good
can be
point.
overwhelming for somebody. So I have a question about homemade fertilizer recipe for indoor orchids.
Oh,
Any thoughts? That's a
I don't know much about that. I will say, I would just say make sure it's not too smelly if it's something you got to live with. But
yeah.
I don't have any recipes really. Um, no. What do you think, Dave?
I just like using you just buy a little thing of the orchid because they're such a specialty flower. I
Yeah.
like using the stuff that I'm not eating it. I don't need to be organic with it. And I just figure the people who made the orchid fertilizer know more than I do. So I'm just using that. I tend to use it at quarter strength every time I water. And that way I just don't have to think about, did I water last week? Did I not? Because it says
Yeah.
usually on there every other time or something like that. So that's just how I handle it. Let's see, get to some other questions here. Just gotta scroll through.
I should also
Yeah,
say I'm usually out in the garden when we do this. It's a little rainy out today. I'm in the Massachusetts Horticultural Society library. We just got some really great collections donated to us. So we're working to sort of move things around and get things classified. And we're planning to have the library open more often to the public so that people can come in and look for books on, they're very specific books, primulas and sweet peas and all, from the golden age of gardening, and a lot of newer books, great design books. So we hope to be open more often so that people can come and check out our references.
it's awesome. Yeah, you're surrounded by knowledge.
Yes.
Um, any ideas on growing strawberries? Someone has a little 4x4 raised bed or something like that.
There's actually a ton of new cultivars coming out. So check in. Trying to think where I've seen all there's really great cultivars. People are breeding for disease resistance. They're It's tricky if it's a very wet summer. Usually you grow strawberries in raised hills. And they often put straw underneath and around them to just protect the fruit. Um, the birds love them, so you got to get out there. You got to beat the birds out to get the strawberries in the morning. A lot of fun though. I mean, even if you only get a couple strawberries, it's a lot of fun to sort of go out and lift up the little leaves and look for the fruit out there. Um, they do get a lot of sort of powdery mildew and fungal problems. Strawberries historically have been one of those fruit that you buy at the grocery store that has a lot of pesticides. So it's, if you can make it work at home and you're not spraying them, and you beat the birds to them and the chipmunks, like they taste very good. So go for it.
Yeah, they are delicious. Chipmunks also think they're delicious. You mentioned in that answer about powdery mildew, and I had a question about the powdery mildew on sunflowers, but it gets on phlox and all sorts of other stuff as well. What do you do? Do you guys leave it?
We've
Lots.
been trying to change out cultivars when we can for things that are noted to be resistant or um, less likely to get powdery mildew. So like Blue Paradise, I think, and David are two cultivars of tall phlox that are less likely to have powdery mildew. So a lot of the gardens here are about 17 years old, 17 to 20 years old. So where, things have gotten huge or things have died or things are sort of hanging on. And as we go work our way through the gardens, we're growing new things from seeds and plugs that solve some of the problems. Because why keep fighting it? We don't want to be like dousing specific plants with pesticides. So it's an educational thing too. We can teach people about the things that we're selecting to put back into the gardens. And then we're not using our resources in a way that is, sort of very much babying or doctoring a plant that's not working out for us.
I think that David variety is white, actually,
Yes. Yeah.
which I grow it. It is a fairly
It's
mildew
robust.
resistant.
Yeah.
It's a robust. It spreads. I like I like the white in the summers because so much is not white. So I think the white kind of gives a nice pop in the garden. Um, all right, Karen, let's get back to some of these questions. One of the questions we have is about how to prune roadies, and these can get really big and out of control. So what do you do to kind of
So
rejuvenate and prune
honestly,
them?
shocking information. If somebody planted rhododendrons at the foundation of their house 25 years ago and now your windows are covered, you can cut it to the ground. Just keep in mind that it will take a little time to rejuvenate. So it's called stooling, when you basically cut a shrub to the ground. You could maybe not be as drastic. You can cut different branches back and sort of tear it down. But they respond really well to pruning, and that's something you could do this time of year as well.
The one thing to note, just to add to Karen's answer, is that if you're pruning now, which is what I would recommend, you are going to probably take off a lot of the flowers
Yes,
for
true.
this season. But it's worth it because you're taking that energy that the plant's going to use to flower and you're letting it kind of rejuvenate itself. So forego the year of flowers to get a thicker, healthier plant. If you wait, you're losing all that time that the plant would have needed to kind of rejuvenate it. You can do it, but it's, in my opinion, it's just not as successful.
Yeah, and if you
Uh,
dabble in gardening, like you could use the cuttings and try and make some, more plants. You could buy a little rooting hormone. Like I love gardening because there's so many ways to make more plants. There's so many ways to experiment if you're just patient, if you, pick your battles, if you, don't expect everything to be a huge success, but like have some fun with it too.
yeah, absolutely. I love that. Educate yourselves. All right. So, how do you handle moss growing under a shady spot next to grass?
Oh, I love it. What's the problem?
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Embrace it. I mean, I have worked with people who take tweezers outside and they pull the little tiny weed sprouts out of the moss to like make sure the moss looks pristine. I don't have an issue with it. I mean, if you had an issue with it, you could sort of scratch it up, and probably there's probably some compaction and probably very, very wet soil. So add some compost probably, and then plant shade loving plants that might sort of compete with the moss, but I love moss. Some people
yeah,
pay big money for moss.
yeah, I agree. I mean, it's if it's growing there and it's thick and it's happy, let it do its thing. All right. When can you plant rhubarb?
Oh, I think you typically plant it in the fall. I think there's a lot of places that have it for sale in the fall. You plant it in the spring too. You can't harvest it for a couple of years. I think it's two growing seasons that it should grow before you plan on sort of taking any heavy harvest off of it. Um, I have not seen mine sprouting yet, but soon. And I also bought these little terracotta cloches. So that's a very British thing you can look up. They typically, I have someone I follow on Instagram. I can't remember what their name is, but they grow rhubarb in a basement, and there's these little tiny lights in there, and they go in and harvest. So if you're restricting the light by putting a cloche on it or growing something in the basement, it just powers up that little terracotta. You pull the lid off and it's like exploding. I sort of went off course there, but I kind of have a little obsession with rhubarb. Yeah, so they're typically available in the fall. You can buy the roots from places that sell horseradish, rhubarb, potatoes, those kinds of places. I think one I order from is called Krieger's. I can't remember. But Google it, and then you can plant fall or spring, but you can't harvest right away. So I always tell people just do it. Just order it, just do it, because don't wait, because you have to wait. And then sooner or later you'll be able to have your rhubarb crumbles and all your dessert.
What's your favorite? I have to ask, since you're obsessed with it, what's your favorite kind of thing to make with your rhubarb?
Oh, there was a really good recipe that came out last year that was like a layer cake that had um Lorna Doone cookies in it. I think it was from Food 52, and a little parfait. It was really good. So we do a lot of jam and we do a lot of baking and stuff like that. But it's nice to combine it with strawberries for a little sweetness.
See, this is why people support GBH because they get plants and
Yes,
like
cooking.
sweets
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the question here, my forsythia has diminished blooms over the past couple of years. Is there anything I can do to revitalize it? I'll take the weather part of it. You can take the
Okay.
revitalizing part.
Yep.
So last year we had a really cold first week of February, and it actually killed the forsythia blooms themselves. So the plants were okay. You probably had a lot of growth, and that's why it didn't bloom. But in terms of revitalizing, Karen, what do you recommend?
It's another thing that can be cut back pretty hard. Um, they get to be a little unruly, and get, they get big, they get mature, and they would love to be revitalized, pruned. I think that a lot of people, yes or no, wrong or right, do sort of hedge trimmers. And if you've ever seen a forsythia that has not been clipped into a meatball, you would probably fall in love with it. So it's the kind of thing that florists use when the stems are very, very long. So I would suggest sort of pruning out the oldest, thickest wood, get into the center of the plant and prune out the oldest, thickest wood, and don't shear it. And then sort of cut thick branches, pull it out, go step back, take a look at it, go back in, go in and out of the plant so make sure it's sort of even. And you really don't want to take out more than a third of the oldest growth each year. So if you get in the pattern of pruning it out, you'll be able to revitalize it over a couple of years. But it will thank you profusely for rejuvenation pruning.
And I think the flowers this year, because we had such a mild winter, as long as we don't have a crazy April, they should be absolutely gorgeous this year because the plants did not flower the past couple of years very well. So one of the questions here, I've got two that I'm interested in your thoughts on. The first one is a negative plant that none of us like, which is the Japanese knotweed. Uh, is there anything you guys do over there with it? And it's just such a beast.
It's a beast. You want to get to it early in the season. Um, Honestly, the way that people take care of it is to um have a little bit of um weed killer. I know everyone's gonna hate this. I'm not saying I do it. I'm just saying people do it. Cut it maybe 6 inches and then paint the top of the stem. You don't want to be spraying everywhere. But you want to get it, it's a bamboo-ish like stem that's hollow. So you want to get a little tiny bit inside that hole that you've just cut on a warm, hot day and early in the season. And that's the only way you're gonna make a difference with it. You can't really dig it. You can't because of the way the roots grow. Anytime you're sort of manipulating the soil around it, you're just gonna make more.
Yeah. I know there's other things out there like smothering it with the black
Yes,
for a couple of seasons.
yes,
You're you that can work, but you're taking offline whatever space.
correct. And that's another method we use is silage tarps. I think there's a company called Farmer's Friend up in Maine. Again, you're buying plastics. It's a thick plastic, and you have to spread it out over your area. For most sections of your garden that you're looking to transform into a garden bed, it's a really good effort to do the silage tarp. But for something like knotweed, you have to leave it down for a very long time. So they give you estimates of like how many days at what temperature it should be out to kill whatever weed you're having trouble with.
I personally, and I will admit it, that I don't use chemicals around the yard very much, but with the knotweed, that's exactly what I do. When you cut it, you're going to see that little hole
Yeah.
where the bamboo is, and I'll take that wand and I'll literally put it in there and just give a little spray, and that way it's not going everywhere, and it literally goes in there. Wait till it's actively growing in the next few weeks, and that's for me. That's the only way because I can't take off. I have a relatively to this process small property. I can't take offline these huge sections, so I gotta get rid of
Exactly.
it without digging it up.
Yeah.
Okay, on to a more positive question here. Let's see. We asked the trimming the hydrangea question. I want to talk about the Asiatic lilies and the lily beetle. And I know that the beneficial insect was actually released right out where you guys are several years ago. Are you back with growing them yet, or
We're not
how are you?
because we don't have a complete deer fence here. Unfortunately, it's something we're working on. So that is like the ultimate like truffle candy for deer, is the Asiatic lily. So they see the buds, they love the buds, they munch it down. It's like the best treat they've ever had. I'm dying to get lilies into the garden. So we're keeping an eye on it, and we're working on perimeter fence project. But yeah, so I lilies, you can order them in the fall. A lot of the catalogs say sold out. And a lot of people actually plant them in the spring. So you can do either. And I have some at home and they're multiplying, but not by a ton. But really that moment, sort of late June, is when I see them. It's sort of a moment in the garden when there's not other things flowering, and I sort of love that. So hopeful, but not here yet.
What about replacing lawn with plants, just in that big general sense? Is there just a few ideas for people that want to get rid of their
You know,
lawn?
it's becoming more mainstream. I see articles in the newspaper of homeowners doing front lawns that are not the traditional sort of mown and blown and green rectangles. So there are warriors who are fighting this battle with local governments and HOAs and things like that. And I feel like it's turning the corner finally. Um, there are really great resources out there for starting to change that process. I've reading about people who are buying plugs or doing seeding. There's ways to do it where you again kill everything with like Roundup or put out silage types and bake it and start over from scratch. Or there's ways to sort of just slow down on the mowing, interplant with a different blend of things that you select for your site for sun or for shade, and sort of slowly and gradually turn the corner. It's cool. It's exciting. I love it for plant lovers. There's so many neighbors who are so ridiculously believing they have to mow their lawn every 3 days. And it's hard. It's a lot of inputs, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of energy. Um, and also I don't think you need to mow your lawn every single Wednesday. You sort of look at the weather, you see if it's grown, so I'm excited. I'm excited that the world is changing and people are loosening up on some of those idealistic views. And I love to see people's diversity in their landscapes and knowing that they're doing really good things for pollinators and reclaiming rainwater and all the sort of natural systems that we need in life.
Yeah, it's awesome. I moved into the house a couple of decades ago, and I've gotten rid of about 50% of the lawn now is gone, and beds. I've been told by my other half I have to stop because wants a little bit of lawn, but
Yeah.
it's a good thing. So I'm gonna let you. Some folks came in late, and one of the questions we have is, I really missed the flower show. Will it ever make a comeback? So I think you have a good answer for this.
Yeah, not exactly the same. I think we're thinking through exactly what a flower show means in 2024, what people want to see. So I think a lot of people I grew up going to the New England flower show at Bayside with my grandma and my aunts and sort of checking it out. So this year we're going to do an on-site event at the Garden at Elm Bank in Wellesley. We have vendors lined up. We have judge floral classes. We have 6 categories of judge floral classes: amateur horticulture, junior horticulture, floral designers, and really tours, demos, headliners for each day. Really great vendors. I'm trying to think what else. So September 21st and 22nd, it's not the same flower show as 20, 30 years ago, but it's our step back in that direction. Really a place where people can come and buy things related to gardening, experience things related to gardening, be inspired by the speakers, and we'll continue to grow it from here. So we haven't done it for a while, and we're dipping our toes back in the pool. You can check out our website. There's information if you're interested in volunteering, if you're interested in being a vendor, if you were interested in doing PR for us, writing a story about it. So reach out and we'll send you more information. All of the classifications for the entering flowers to the flower show judging is online there. We're super excited. We're working feverishly on it right now. But I said I would love a place where I could go wander around gardens, buy a bouquet of flowers, have a nice drink to walk around with, and really just be inspired. And so that's what we're planning.
Yeah, it sounds like an awesome event, and I don't want to rush September, but it does sound like it'll be a good kind of late summer, early autumn
Yeah,
way
and
to
we have a really,
celebrate.
if people haven't visited the garden here, we have a really nice layout. There's a nice loop through the garden. So we'll have vendors spread out everywhere and some food trucks. And moments where you can experience our gardens. Everything looks really beautiful here in September. And see what we have, see our new plants that we've planted. All of our horticulturists and our really great volunteer docents will be out leading tours and programs and explaining everything that we do and answering questions. And I think it's just gonna be a nice place for all of us plant nerds to get together and learn from each other.
Nerd is such a great word. So let's nerd out on dividing perennials. So we had a question about dividing hostas, but I think we can talk about, this time of the year, how, it's so easy to just dig up and throw it back in.
Yeah, do it. We're gonna be dividing some daylilies from our daylily collection, and we're gonna put some of them up on our plant sale. It's the time. You can sort of separate the fans. Not everything is sprouted yet, so especially with something like hostas, when you start seeing it come up, slice it, cut it up. The bigger the leaves get, the more damage you're probably going to do to it, and it might not be as attractive for the garden season. So before everything sort of unfurls totally, slice it up and make it happen and give it to your friends.
Yeah. I have a saw that I use just for this because it gets a little dull and I just dig it up and just like literally cut those things and don't be afraid. If you do it now, like Karen's saying, then it's going to, when it grows, it's going to kind of fill itself in and look pretty good. If you wait until those leaves are up, it'll still live. It's just not going to look as attractive at that
Yeah,
point.
daylilies, geraniums, hostas, astilbes. I might do some of the irises, depending what kind of iris. I might do those in the fall or after they flower, just because some of the irises are pretty early flowering. So you don't want to really dig them up right this minute and sort of wreck your flowers for the season. But yeah, there's tons of gardening tasks we can all do. We have weeds coming up. There's spring weeds, so you want to try and get to them before they flower and start spreading more seed to keep coming up in your garden. If you like edging, if you like formality, you can get a lot of edging done. We're doing some tune-ups on our irrigation system. We don't love to run it all the time, but and I don't think we had it on a couple days last summer. It was so wet. But just having it as a backup or having your hoses ready or making sure stuff's not leaking, and getting ready if you do need to turn it on to keep grass seed germinating and things that you've divided moist. Lots to
Karen,
do.
can you talk a little bit about fertilizer, like what you guys use for fertilizer out there, when you apply it, like how are you accomplishing that?
We have not used much fertilizer. So we recommend that people get a soil test before they fertilize. It's really important to know what you're dealing with and not make guesses. We haven't done a lot of fertilizing. We've done a lot of sort of bed amendments with compost and leaves and stuff that we have on site. And so we're got a soil test in progress, and we'll make sure that we've got everything in line for especially our turf areas. I'm guessing we've got to do some lime out there. Yeah, so figure out what you need before you buy it, and make sure that you're correcting for what you want to grow and what your deficiencies are.
One of the questions near and dear to my heart is how do you feel about using shredded leaves versus commercial mulch? So I am shredding leaves in the garden this week and throwing them back in. What's your thoughts on
I love
that?
it. Yeah. It's just some bark that you buy and some stuff has dye in it and you don't really need it. I like organic materials. I think the bark mulch, if you have it, we do use some of the big chunky stuff that comes from tree trimming. So it's not processed. We'll use some of that on pathways and try and get a nice hard pack on it. But I love leaves. They just break down so quickly. You'll notice the difference in the amount of worms and the fluffiness of the soil very, very quickly. And so we collected a lot of leaves. We have like a leaf holding pen, and we flipped it once or twice, and then we'll start bringing it back out into the garden. And in other places, we have shredded in the fall and added it to the beds to protect plantings. And we love leaves.
Yeah, leaves are such. I mean, if you think about, like, to your point about driving around and looking at what plants are doing well in sides of the highway, like nature drops these leaves and basically says, "Here, some fertilizer."
Yes.
It gets all churned up by the worms and the other things. And why aren't we doing the same thing? Like, it's great stuff. Um, Mountain laurel, leggy, which I have trouble with. Do you guys prune there? Like, how do you handle mountain laurel?
Kind of similar to rhododendrons, iris. Um, they will, even on thickish wood, they will, if you do a good hard prune, they will send out new shoots. So think about, um, a lot of people sort of nip when they're pruning, and I would challenge you to really think about the shape. You might take off a bigger branch or take something down by a third. Think about the cuts you're making, because where you make the cuts is where you're going to get probably two buds reaching out to regrow. So don't just take little things off the bottom. Think about the shape in the end, and it's probably going to be cutting something that's a little thicker than you think.
Karen, are you on social? Do you do social media? Do you interact much with folks?
I don't. I should. I can.
No,
I will.
there's no shoulds. It's just a question. It's just a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Um, we're getting to the end here. So I want to thank you, first of all, for being here and surrounded by the book knowledge, but also your mental knowledge is amazing. And it's like a repository of plant knowledge. So thank you so much from the audience, for myself, for all that you do. We're
It's
sorry we
fun.
couldn't
It's
get.
hard. It's hard to be on the hot seat. I sweat a little bit, but it's good
Yeah,
to keep
these are
things
not
sharp.
prepared questions, right? Like I'm literally looking at the computer, choosing which questions to ask. So thank you so much for that. We also, in the mornings on GBH with Paris and Jeremy, I answer questions about gardening. So if you are on Twitter or other social media and you go to GBH, Paris and Jeremy, also I'm Growing Wisdom on social. You can ask questions. I'm happy to answer them as well. If I don't know, I can go to Karen. I know where she lives, and
Yeah.
find those questions as well. So thank you so much. Remember, please continue to support GBH. You know, public radio, TV are all under a lot of pressure, and it is because of supporters like you that it's able to continue. So we desperately need your help to continue that. Thank you. Have a terrific weekend. Happy St. Pat's Day. Happy spring, and go into the garden.